everyone, thank you for being here. Today we are talking about 3 different ways that we need to stop dating our problems by dating our problems. There are a numerous amount of things that we all face in our day-to-day life that are actually remnants of what we faced as children. And at the end of the day, whatever we are doing right now that we can't seem to get a hold of or are still struggling with, it is because it is something that we struggled with for a very long time. I grew up as a child that had to be seen and not heard, and had to make the good grades and had to do well in school. And that has created these different ways that I approach life. I don't want to be a burden to other people by sharing what I'm thinking or what I'm going through or my emotions. And I'm always going to be doing my best all the time and in some ways search for that validation from other people. And when I don't get it, it's difficult. Now that sounds like a pretty typical thing that a lot of us deal with, but until we go back to when it originated, when did this start becoming a thing, we are going to keep falling back into this pattern in our own lives, and we have to let it go, process through it in order to become the best version of ourselves, because it happened however many years ago it happened, and they eventually stopped doing it to you. Your parents, your teachers, your friends, they stopped making you feel this way, and you picked up and you started making yourself feel that way. And in order for us to figure out why we're still dealing with it, we have to figure out when it happened. Were you 8 years old and you had to show up to school and do the best that you could, and you couldn't really ask questions because the teacher always made you feel dumb? Maybe that's where it all started. That's why you worked so hard to prove to everyone that you can do things. And if that is where you fall, that isn't a bad thing, but you can take those skills and use them for your own good. It doesn't matter how it happened or where it happened or when it happened, and thinking about it and letting it go doesn't excuse those behaviors either. That teacher should have stood up for you and allowed you to ask those questions. Your parents should have wanted to hear your emotions. Your siblings shouldn't have bullied you constantly and hurt your feelings, but those things happened. And at the end of the day, we can either acknowledge them and see how they have continued to integrate themselves into our lives, or just allow them to be there and continue to hurt us. At the end of the day, whatever we do, it is up to us to take responsibility for our life. And that means that if you have a hand in what happened, you have a hand in changing it, because you get to respond and take control of your life, and you actually have to do that. That is your obligation in life, is to follow through on the life that you've always wanted. Now, it might be super daunting to think, well, how am I supposed to figure out when my parents started to make me feel like I had to behave a certain way in order to achieve certain things? Now, there's plenty of ways that you can go about looking at it, but one of the things that really sparked this journey for me of, well, what did happen and how did I get here, was this book called Green Lights. Now, Green Lights came out in October of 2020 and was inspired by Matthew McConaughey's speech that he gave to Texas A&M for their commencement. I graduated in May of 2020, meaning I didn't get a commencement. I didn't get a commencement speaker. So I took that as an opportunity to pick one. And I re-listened to Matthew McConaughey's speech probably 50 times that summer. And every day I got something else from it, and I just needed something to hold on to realize that there was value in the experiences that I've gone through, and that I was writing my own story. Nobody else was doing it for me. Now, one of the things I should have bookmarked it, but one of the things he talked about was writing a letter. He specifically says, "Places are like people. They each have a particular identity. In all my travels around the globe, I've written in my journal about the culture of a place, its identity. If a place and a people move me, I'll write them a love letter. New Orleans is one of those places." So he wrote a love letter to New Orleans, and I didn't realize it until I reread this book this past few months, that was the reason why I started writing love letters to myself. And I have these letters. I've talked about it before, but worth bringing up again. In August of 2020, I started writing love letters to myself because I realized that I was waiting for everybody to step up and be there and be something for me that nobody else was, that nobody else could be, that I wasn't able to get from others. So I started to write myself love letters, and it would always take me 5 minutes to finish the letter. I would look at my phone to figure out what the date was so I could write that down. And then I would write the letter, and then on the envelope, I would write the timestamp, and it was always about 5 minutes. And I've written over 150 letters specifically, and then it's just a practice that I've been doing on and off since then. And I realized that I did it because of that line in that book, to prove to myself that if I don't show up for myself for 5 minutes every single day, how can I expect somebody else to? If I can't forgive myself for what has happened or what hasn't happened, how can I expect somebody else to show up for me and to be there for me? So these love letters became proof to myself that I could show up for me, that I did care about my own thoughts, and that I believed my future was in front of me and that my best days were still to come. I had to prove to myself that it didn't matter who was there and who wasn't, that I was going to do that. So through these letters, there was times where I reflected back on the past, where things came from, but ultimately it was more proof to myself in the moment that if people didn't show up for me when I was a kid, when I was a teen, when I was in college, when I went through really difficult moments, it didn't matter anymore, because with every letter, I was rewriting the story that, hey, I'm going to show up for me. And if somebody is choosing not to show up for me, that's on them. And I have physical proof. This is another, I taped all of them into notebooks. There's hundreds of them. There's different ones. I went to Christmas tree shop. I think they've all closed now. And they had these little packets of 10 letters, or 10 with envelopes, and I just wrote every day. Sometimes it was in the morning, sometimes it was at night. But for 5 or 6 months, every day I tried to write it down, and tried to give myself some space to say, you know what? I know that people haven't shown up for you. I know that there was times that people should have and they didn't. And I'm sorry that they didn't. And a lot of times that is what I wrote. I'm sorry that other people didn't show up for you, but I'm here now. And it became this proof that if I could show up for me for 5 minutes at a time, and a great deal over that summer, that was the time where I had started my first job out of school, I would have time after work to be on my own, because I lived on my own and I was 2.5 hours away from my family, so it was just my coworkers, and it was a pandemic, so there wasn't a lot of socializing happening. So I had to figure out a way to create stuff, to do something with my time, and it became this love story that I created with myself. And it wasn't to say that I didn't need another person to be my companion in life. It wasn't to say that everybody else wasn't able to show up for me. It was to prove to myself that the things that I wanted others to give me, I needed to give to myself first, if for no other reason, because I deserved it, because I believed that I deserved to have love in my life, first and foremost, and that at the end of the day, no matter who I'm with for the rest of my life, I will be with myself. And if I don't treat that relationship as important, as valuable, then how am I going to be able to deal with things? I won't be able to. I won't be able to decide that, hey, this person's behavior actually isn't worth it because I show up for me and this person can't show up for me. I don't need to know what's further down this road. I know that I'm better than this. So for the next 5 years, I've lived on my own and went back to this practice more or less over the past 5 years and have deeply enjoyed getting to know myself in that way and to showing up for myself. And there's many, many notebooks filled with writing and review over my life and what happened and what didn't. And you would think that having many, many notebooks, I think they're all in this one, yeah, that I would go back through them and see them often and go back to them and look at what I wrote, but it's actually been more so just physical proof of how much time I've spent on myself and how much time I've spent with myself, and that I'm not this awful person or this burden to be around. And if a person who claims to care about me is making me feel that way, then they don't care about me, because I care about me, and that's not how I make myself feel. But if that is how you're making yourself feel, then the first person who is betraying your trust, betraying you, is you. And if you don't show up for you, how can you expect somebody else to show up for you? So that was one of the ways that I dived into, where did this self-confidence issue come from, this inability to look at life come from, and that was really where I had to start. So rereading this book, I think I read it in February or March, was really important because I got to see where it all began and what inspired it. And you never know what could inspire you on this entire journey. All of these books that I've written are these notebooks that I've filled. It was because of that one line and that one promise I made to myself, that I was going to show myself that I mattered and that I was of value. And so that journey continued. Now, something that we often do is we date the problem. Now, over the years, I've definitely been around many people and have seen different sides of people, and a lot of them will trigger certain things out of me. And those triggers are actually really valuable because they show us where there's still hurt, where there's energy being spent on something that we need to resolve. And if we don't resolve them, then we're the ones who are going to suffer from it, and for any of the potential people who should be in our lives. There's plenty of people who shouldn't, and we need to revoke access, as we've talked about in this series, as much as possible and as often as possible. But if we don't build a foundation of why we matter, what it is that we provide to ourselves and to the world, and who we are as people, it's going to be a lot easier to let somebody come in who makes you feel bad and you stick around, because that's how you felt when you were a kid. That's how you felt throughout your life. So this person validating those feelings is going to feel like normal. You have to stop normalizing the behavior of these people who are hurting you over and over again, by realizing, where did this hurt begin? And that even if you don't know the date of when it happened, you do know that you have the ability to resolve it by creating new memories. Sometimes we can't erase memories, but the more new ones we have that are better, the easier it is to not look at those other ones. So you have to realize that this person showing you who they are is fine. Not everyone you meet is going to be compatible with you. They're not going to find you interesting or funny or want to be around you, and that's okay. Because if you want to be around you, then that's the biggest win that you can get. So build your life. Go and do activities, spend time with yourself, enjoy being alone. Because when you're alone, you get to be in your own field of energy. You get to create your life. You make decisions. You decide when you're going to take the trash out, when you're going to eat, what you're going to eat, where you're going to go, if you're going to stay in all day, what show you're going to watch. You get to build this life of yours. And I've lived alone for the past 5 years, and that is what I've been able to do. I got to build my life one step at a time and rebuild it and build myself into the version of myself that I want it to be. And when you do live alone and you can't depend on somebody to validate your emotions or your feelings, you have to do it for yourself. There's plenty of times where I've been really sad thinking about all the people who've left and who aren't there for me and who I'm no longer talking to, and been very in the dumps and crying, and I had to be the one to pick myself up off the floor, put myself to bed or get some food, take a shower, and move on. I had to do it for myself. And every single time you do that, you build this resilience that, hey, I survived it last time. Yeah, maybe I cried for a majority of the day because I watched some sad movies and it triggered all these emotions. But at the end of the day, you get to move on and you get to decide what you're going to do. So if you do live alone, if you are alone, if you're not in a relationship, it's not a bad thing. You get to choose how your life progresses. You get to make the decisions for you. You get to have the best meals. You can exercise the way you want. You can go and spend time with people, without people. You get to choose who's in your life. and you get to grow into your own person. And I would highly recommend you choose to do that over spending time with people who make you sad, who make you feel unworthy, who are going to be these reflections of a past childhood that didn't make you feel good. And if you did have a good childhood, then you have an even better foundation to say, all right, I know what it's like to be loved and cared for. I'm not going to settle for less. Because being alone means you get to live the life that you want. You decide how much money you're going to get by going after the jobs that you want to. And if you don't like the job that you're at, you go and you find another one. Or you deal with this one and you work hard to get promoted. You can do all of these things. And when you are not constantly handing off your energy to every person and asking for their validation, because when I decide to take the trash out, it's my decision. I don't need to co-sign that with anyone. And every time you make a decision by yourself, for yourself, you build this trust in yourself. And every time I wrote the letters, every time I sat down and reflected on who I wanted to be and where I wanted to go, I was building a new future and new pathways that I was going to be okay. I was going to end up in the place that I wanted to be. And now, 5 years later, at 27, I get to make more decisions for myself and to take a step back and look at, is this the right decision for me? And to trust that I can uphold whichever decision I make, and that the next decision I make may not be the greatest one, but I do know that I can overcome whatever happens. The choice that you make isn't, this is the right one. It's, I'm going to be okay with whatever consequences come with it, and I'm going to be able to handle and be responsible for them. So at the end of the day, you have to look at, what is it that I deserve? You get to decide that. You get to set the bar. And anybody who doesn't meet it is going to feel empty. It's going to feel like eating candy instead of a nourishing meal. And candy's fun, but you don't eat candy for every meal. But you do ideally eat something good for you most of your meals. And you want the people around you who feel like good for most of the meals, who make you feel better, who you feel recharged around, who you get to be the best version of yourself around. And show it to yourself first. Show up for you. Be the person that you want to be. Now, I did these letters for a great deal of 20, 21, and 22. And then for 23, I had one notebook that I wrote in for most of it. And had a lot of lists that I wrote in. But every time I sat down to write, I enjoyed it because nobody was judging me. Nobody was telling me I needed to write faster or better. The pen wasn't judging me. The paper wasn't judging me. And nobody in my house was judging me because I was by myself. Maybe there were some ghosts that were like, what is she doing? But I don't know. They didn't tell me. So what is it that you're doing for yourself on a daily basis? How can you bring this joy back into your life? How can you say yes to yourself more often? How can you indulge in the life that you live in without somebody else's validation or approval or lack thereof? We had one chance to have a childhood, but now we have hopefully many years to figure out who it is that we want to be and to redirect that course as needed. As we learn, as we grow, we will change that course. So who is it that you want to be and why? Now, the third thing is going back to you. How can you fall in love with that person that you've always been, right? That's what we talked about. How can we avoid these people who aren't there for us? And then 3, continue to show up for the person and the life that you want. How are you going to look back on these years and decide that they were worth it, that you lived the best that you could? And 2024 was a really big year for me, and it was also the year that I was like, you know what? I want to write a journal for every month of the year, and every month I'm going to have a different word that I reflect on throughout that year. So this is 2024's journals. And looking back, all of the words matched up perfectly to what happened in each of those months. And the first one for January was acceptance, and then February was renaissance, which honestly couldn't be better choices. All of them are really good choices for words, because of how those months reflected those words. Renaissance, I was let go from my job, and this whole whirlwind journey of moving on into the next version of myself began. And I got to become the greatest version of myself, still in transformation as time went on. So how are you showing up for yourself? Look at the problems, sit with the problems that you've had in your life and ask, why? Why did this happen? What's continuing to happen? And how do I move through them? How do I deal with this? Sit with these thoughts. Sit with these issues. You can read as many books as you want. You can write as much as you want. But until you make the active decision to move forward, to say enough is enough, I don't need everyone's validation. I don't need everyone's acceptance of my life. I need to trust myself and the decisions that I make. And that's it. And at the end of the day, you're going to make choices that you may go on to regret or should have taken longer to do. But that's what life is. You have to do what you can with the information that you have, and then do better once you have more information. I don't know what life holds after this next day, and I don't even know what's going to happen for the rest of the day. All I do know is that every time I make a choice for myself, I am promising myself that whatever it is that happens next, I will be able to deal with it. And that if there's people in my life who are supposed to be there, they will continue to show that to me. And if they're not, that time will show that as well. Our childhoods have happened. There's nothing we can do to change them. We can reflect on them. We can figure out where these patterns have come from. But at some point, we have to put that down and step forward into the next version of ourselves. We have to say, enough is enough. I can choose to sit here and contemplate everything that's ever happened for years, but that doesn't project me into a better life. It doesn't get me a better job. It doesn't get me better friends. It doesn't get me a better partner. At the end of the day, everything that I do has to be an active choice. I have to go out there in the world to make new friends. I have to stop talking to the ones that aren't adding joy to my life. I have to believe that the person that I am is enough. And that if I've been told before that I'm not, that's okay. Because people can say whatever they want, but it's up to us to decide what it is that's going to sit with us for a long time. We can move forward only if we decide that we will. Our future is in front of us, and no matter what happened, our current story, the story we're going to become, is unwritten. And we get to choose the next word, the next chapter, every single time we make a choice. Make it with intention. Life is going to unfold in a direction. You might as well be the one choosing it. And write something down. Write yourself a love letter. Write a story that you're going to be proud of when you hopefully make it to a very old age, because even that in and of itself is not promised. So live today. Hug the people that you love today. Share with people that you care about, and move forward. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happened. All that matters is what you do with it. So I hope you got something out of today. We will continue the series. I am moving, so hopefully there will be a few more videos in this location, but there will be another one. And the story continues on. And I appreciate every single one of you who have been on this journey with me, have seen this change over these past 5 years. I started this channel pretty much around the same time when I started all of this writing, so I want to share with you, and I appreciate it. You're going to do amazing things because you're going to put in the work, and this is going to be the life that you've always dreamed of because it's yours. I hope you have an amazing week, and I will see you soon.